Gabriel. Welcome to the show. Very happy to meet with you today.
It's a privilege to be here. Thank you
It's
for inviting me.
yeah, it's a privilege to have you here, brother. I'm really happy to chat with you today. Um, I love your content. I love the messaging that you're putting out there, and it's definitely affected me in a very positive way, and I see that it affects a lot of people as well. So, let's just start with how'd you get into this? How did you start posting and sharing such a powerful message about Native cultures?
It all started for me, to be honest, probably about, man, 20 years ago. If I'm to be honest with
Hmm.
you.
Yeah.
Um, a little bit about my background. My name is Gabriel
Hmm.
Clark Faust, but I also go by Gabriel Hooso.
Hmm.
Um, I was adopted at a young age. I was adopted at the age of 1 years old with my twin brother, Rafael, also known as Rafael Coyote. And, you know, it's been a journey of self discovery. And we grew up in a predominantly um, white town. And our adoptive parents were white. And, we dealt with a lot in our situation, to say the least. And, it kind of left me in this rabbit hole of self discovery because I had what was called a sealed adoption.
Hmm.
So, a sealed adoption is basically I wasn't able to make contact with my biological family until I was 18 years old. So, all I was told growing up was that I was Mexican and Native American,
Hmm.
right? And I wasn't told what part of Mexico my family came from, my roots were. I wasn't told what specific Native American tribe I was from. So that kind of left me on, this questioning,
Yeah.
this awakening, this seeking of some sort of like whole that I always felt, and I always felt it in microaggressions growing up. I always felt it in different ways growing up. These
Wh-
kind
What
of
did what
these
did you mean
gaps.
microaggressions?
I guess microaggressions growing up in a predominantly white area.
Hmm.
People would look at me, and I could tell I wasn't really welcome.
Mm,
You know,
yeah. Yeah.
for the way I looked, the color of my skin, my features.
Hmm.
And there's definitely, and I grew up in a pretty liberal area, and
Where'd you grow up at?
specifically Pacifica, California,
Okay.
Northern California.
Okay.
And, you know, it's not a bad place to be. It's not. It's definitely an affluent area. I don't hate the people over there,
Hmm.
but there definitely is some, uh, there's
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
colonial mentality that I think
Absolutely.
that the majority of the United States, and I'd argue the majority of Latin America, is still experiencing.
Hmm.
And on my journey of rediscovering my roots, looking into the history, looking into uh, the history of Mexicans and the history of Native Americans, I realized that these two peoples are one people.
Hmm.
We are an indigenous American people. The majority of Mexican people, Central American people, South American people are in fact Native American people.
Hmm.
And, we've been told that we are Latino, Hispanic, immigrant, foreigner, etc. And very little has been taught to us about our indigenous roots, our Native American roots. And it's very intentional with the history of colonization. So, with me, what I'm trying to share is spread awareness to that fact.
Hmm.
And, basically shed a light that it's okay to be Native. It's okay to be proud of who we truly are. And it's okay to acknowledge that, you know, yeah, that we are the original people of this land. And there's nothing wrong with that inherently. And we can actually get a sense of pride from that.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great point. Especially getting into looking at we could say these imaginary lines, these borders that have been drawn, they've been drawn so many times and then redrawn. And so you grew up in California, which is a state in the United States, but until what was it, 1845, I think, is when those lines were redrawn. I don't know if that's when California officially became a state in the United States, but before that, it was Mexico. And then before that,
Yes,
it was indigenous territory. So
absolutely.
all of these, I mean, here we are celebrating, so many people celebrating 250 years anniversary of America, but that's 250 years of the original 13 colonies declaring independence from England. The history of California, the Southwest United States becoming a part of the United States, which was done by force through a war, is much more recent than that. And so we had so many people that were living there, my family included, who were then, caught up in this war and then naturalized and nationalized in a sense to
Yep.
become American. And you mentioned that this forgetting or erasing of the culture was intentional. I mean, the old or the famous saying is, let all that is Indian you be washed away, I think is how it's said. So, yeah, all of this was very intentionally erased, so to speak. All the people who were living here when those borders were redrawn, they faced some very intense radical changes that had to happen really quickly. And
Oh, absolutely.
I think that we still see that today.
Oh, definitely. You know, um, my wife, she is Quetzon,
Mhm,
and that's an indigenous tribe over here in what is now southern Arizona, right? But also they have land that extends into parts of California as well.
mhm,
And yeah, you know, her grandpa was in boarding school. Like you said, a big saying that was there was kill the Indian, save the man,
mhm.
right?
Yeah.
Kill the Indian, save the man. And I think that a lot of people, they look at the American Indian and they see it in a very, like within the United States, within the US, right? And, you know, there were boarding schools in Mexico.
Mhm.
There was boarding schools in Central America. There was boarding schools in South America, and they were called internados.
Yeah, we had
And
residential schools in Canada, First Nations as well, still going on to this day.
absolutely, Greenland,
Yeah.
all over the Americas, the continent. And,
Mhm,
you know, with that being said, there's only specific areas that are being taught when it comes to indigenous history
mhm,
and our identity as Native people. And I mean that not only in the sense of the indigenous peoples of the United States and Canada, but also Mexico, which is also part of North America. Geographically, it's part of North America.
mhm,
People say that it's part of Central and South America, but to be a Mexican, the majority of these people, of our people, are North American Indians. And I know
mhm,
I guess to say that in this day and age is a very radical sentiment, but it is a sentiment that I believe holds very true. We are North American indigenous people. That's a fact. And, you know, we look at the history and we take up kind of that veil of colonization and Eurocentrism and indoctrination, assimilation. We'll see the truth, if you follow the history. And, 20 years ago as a kid, you know, I had that basic information, Mexican and Native American. And as I was researching very deeply, like really in this, like just reading and reading and reading and reading, I was realizing, and that realization is that the indigenous American, there it is right there. I told you.
That's okay.
I'm sorry, where was I?
We were talking about dogs barking. Now, we're talking
Yeah.
about when you were researching native cultures as a kid.
Oh, yeah. Um, yeah, when I was researching native cultures as a kid, I was realizing that, yeah, our identity there has been a psychological warfare, on native people, you know, deep, very deep. In Mexico, Central America, Latin America, there's the phrase, para mejorar la raza, you know, very common, "Cásate con un güero,"
Hmm.
right?
What do those mean?
Basically to better the race.
Hmm.
Very common phrase, to
Yeah.
better the race, marry up, marry a European person. And
Mm.
again, I'm saying this not because I have anything against white people. I actually do not. But this is history and this is a very real reality
Yeah.
um, for many people in Latin America, you know?
That's a very important sentiment right there. Um, Hell, I remember I was living in Chicago in Pilsen, primarily Latino neighborhood,
Yeah.
and I was walking down my street with my girlfriend, she was a white woman,
Mhm.
and one of my neighbors, his name was Grumaro. We'd always hang out and talk, and he'd go, "Oh, you got yourself a white girl." There was this big sentiment and pressure to try to, yeah, just as you're saying, um, go into white culture in a sense. I mean, I remember my whole dad's side of the family desperately wanting to assimilate and to integrate into white culture in so many ways. I got a picture of my dad's wedding, one of the few pictures I have of him, and I'm there, and you see all of these brown people, native Mexican, whatever we want to call them, all
Yeah.
together in a photo. And then at the very center of the photo, in the beginning, you got three white people, a dad, a mom, and their little kid. And the whole image is everybody kind of like putting all their energy into these three people at the very front. It wasn't their wedding. I don't even know who they were, but you can just see exactly what you're talking about. This is so alive and well today. This almost desperation to assimilate and integrate into the predominant culture that exists today.
Yeah. It's very interesting. I and I don't hide the fact that I was adopted at 1 years
Hmm.
old. I grew up in an affluent area. Um, my parents, were white, wealthy, and I do have a certain privilege with that. But I do think with that privilege, it really gave me the ability to look deep. You know,
Yeah.
I had a lot of time on my hands as a kid, and I had definitely have some privileges, and I'm acknowledging them. But I do think that it's kind of strange because I see people who are like the opposite of me, and we're like polar opposites. Like I'll meet a guy raised in a you know, by a Mexican native family,
Hmm.
right? But and he'll grow up in a Mexican community, but he'll try to be more on the patriotic, try to
Hmm.
emulate uh like a white guy
Yeah.
essentially.
Yeah.
And he'll feel like he's trying to fit into that, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? And then while I'm in the absolute opposite background, I was adopted by white people
Hmm.
and, in an affluent neighborhood that was very patriotic, I guess you could say, colonized.
Hmm.
Um, and I've always felt this pull towards indigenous culture, indigenous history, and being, aligning with my indigenous roots and carrying that into my identity, not as a side, not like I'm a Hispanic. Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess we have like Aztec or something or Mayan, that's kind of where it leaves off with most of our people. But there's 68, 69 different indigenous native nations in Mexico that are federally recognized. You know, arguably there's hundreds
Yeah.
in Mexico alone. And, you know, it's deeper than what we have been taught.
Of
It's
course.
deeper than Aztec. It's deeper than Maya. Is there anything wrong with if you are those? Absolutely not.
Right.
Learn about it.
Yeah.
But there are so many diverse indigenous cultures, history, etc., languages. Some of them are within a 5 to 10 mile radius, and their languages are as distinct as English and Chinese. There was just so much diversity going on in the Americas,
Yeah.
and there still is. You know what I mean?
I mean,
But
even
there's
the
just so much misinformation
yeah.
that, as someone who is passionate and cares about his people and his roots and is passionate about the process of reconnecting, for me, I just couldn't stand to just be on the sideline, and I don't consider myself a knowledge guru or anything like that. But as a native man, you know, the pull was there to definitely say something, do something, even if it's just a damn reel, to just be out there and be raw with the facts, you know?
Hmm.
Because with misinformation, the misinformation is so, I don't know. It's atrocious. It
It
really
is.
is.
It really is. Yeah. I mean, even just talking about like Aztec and Mayans, like the Aztec is referring to, again, hundreds of different nations,
Yeah.
all Nahul and Mexica that were all around there. And so much of this individuality has just been completely erased, intentionally washed away. And so, I mean, let me ask this question first of all. This is something I wanted to ask you is coming from your background, being native, being Mexican, and growing up in a white neighborhood, in a white culture with a white adopted family, was it difficult for you at all to start to engage with this culture that you come from? Were there obstacles and barriers that were hard?
Yeah, definitely. And
Hmm.
I'm not here to bash my
No, of course.
adoptive parents,
Yeah, of course.
but I keep it real. I'm going to keep it real here, guys. With eh, you know, and I was adopted by two European men. They were a couple,
Hmm.
and you know, you would think, and grew up in a very liberal area, Pacifica, California, 15 minutes away from San Francisco. You know, we're as liberal as it gets. You know, um, nothing against that, um, but there was still some very, very, and I'm not gonna say it's right. I'm not gonna say it's left. I'm just gonna say it's colonial.
Hmm. Yeah.
The genocidal rhetoric that was said growing up that for a lot of people would cause them to shrink,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Cause them to shrink and hide. But for me, I just never quite saw it. I just never quite saw Native people as what was said by my, and it wasn't both parents, it was one of my fathers over the other.
Hmm.
And we've worked things out. He's an older guy. He comes from a, I'm not saying that makes it okay.
Hmm.
Trust me, it's not. But we worked a lot of things out. We're in a better place. But anyway, um, yeah, no, the prejudice was there,
Yeah.
and I will say that my other father, he was a fireman. His name was Richard Faust. He taught me logic. He taught me how to think clearly, and that's one thing I'm very, very grateful for.
Hmm.
I couldn't have done all this, and whatever he may think of it, I couldn't have been able to assure myself in this way without him. You know, and he isn't a native person, but he did help me for better or worse. Like, this is what I became.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so I would say, like, yeah, no, it was difficult. It was difficult. There was pushback for sure. There was just like frustration. Like, there is a lot of like, why are you trying to be like a drunken Indian? Why are you trying to be like a wetback beaner?
Yeah.
Like, you know, what is the goal here? The
Yeah.
idea is, what are the goal here? But, that's the thing. There's a lot of ignorance on their end as well, and I used to think lowly of myself in that regard is like, well, what if what they're saying is true? What if their narrative is true? But I realize that's just the narrative of um, the colonizer. And that narrative is something that they themselves have been taught in ignorance.
Yes.
Even white people can be liberated from the incorrect um, misinformation that's been put forth. I truly believe it. And I think that, all peoples, regardless of their race, black, white, red, yellow, etc., they all have indigenous roots to somewhere. And I think on a human level, we can all relate. I truly do.
Hmm.
And I believe that's a decolonial uh, sentiment in general.
Yeah.
And, you know, I think that growing up, it was definitely a challenge. But as they were my teacher, I feel like I was a teacher to them too,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
we went to Mexico.
Yeah.
We went to powwows. We went to these things because I wanted to go. My
Wow.
brother wanted to go. We had these interests.
Yeah.
And then I remember my father actually passed away when I was 17. He was a fireman,
Uh-huh.
and the smoke from one of the fires he was in, when it affected his lungs, and he developed lung cancer and he died. And I remember telling him, you know, he's going to all these native events and whatnot, and he told me, all this stuff is really beautiful. And get a little emotional here, but I asked him. He just said a lot of good things about being native.
What are you feeling right now telling me this?
Honestly, hope
Yeah.
is beautiful.
Yeah. Hope. That's a form of happiness right there. And yeah, that is so beautiful that, I mean, yeah, you had difficulties with one of your parents, and I mean, perhaps that was even a teaching in its own way, a preparation for things to come. And then you also had something really incredible here too, which is, yeah, another parent who was willing to go into this with you and to help you explore it. That's really quite incredible.
Yeah, he really did help me. Um, I don't know if he'd align fully with my mission, but regardless, I think he was ultimately on a human level. He'd be for it,
Hmm.
you know. Um, but yeah, I would say that when we were talking, we spoke, and I just asked him, you know, I want to make a change for Indigenous people, for Native people, not just here in the Americas, but all Native people. And I really think I can do it. And I just remember looking at his face, and I was 17 at the time. He was passing on. He asked me what I wanted to do. And I feel like he always had an idea, but he wasn't sure. We were just being really raw at that time. And he told me, it's going to be hard. And there's going to be people trying to stomp you out.
Yeah.
That's what he told me, honestly. And it's going to be an uphill battle. It's not something I really want for you, but it's a truth, something good.
That is the truth, isn't it?
That's what he left with me. And yeah, I don't know. No one's asked me that question. I never really talked to people about that, but
Yeah. Yeah, I mean,
this
who
is all heavy subject matter.
it's okay, yeah. And I mean, this is great because this is what we go through in these situations. This is
Absolutely.
this is a real part of the experience. I mean, that uphill battle, that hatred that you're talking about, that's only one part of the story, right? There's so much more to it, but that one part is it carries a lot of weight. I mean, I
It
can't
does.
tell you how many times I've cursed the way that I've looked and my heritage and my race, because of just how many times, I've been spit on and attacked and told to go back to where I came from, and, the hells that I've gone through just because of these things. So, I mean, on the one hand, nobody would really wish this upon anybody, but on the other hand, what an incredible path to walk.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, I always think to Malcolm X, he's a great hero of mine personally. And I believe that what he was doing for his people is very similar to, in a way, to what I'm, hoping to move for our people, like drive home for our people. Just in liberation,
Yeah,
awareness, consciousness, because there is just so much self hate. It isn't funny.
yeah.
I remember telling my father too, all of this, all of it. This is, some, he was a white gay guy from New Jersey, that I would go in depth with him. I would tell him fully what I felt, and he would just tell me like, I mean, he'd be silent. I remember just there are moments where he'd just be silent because there were some truths that could not be denied.
Yeah.
You know, I remember even asking him like, adopting a native child, like, you know what, what were you thinking?
What'd he
Like, I
say?
wanted to understand it. Is this some sort of like a white savior thing or what?
Yeah, what'd he say to
Because
that?
he would just look at me. He was like, "No, I just saw two beautiful boys, two twin boys,
uh
and you guys chose us." That's what he always say. To what extent that's true, I don't know. But regardless, you know, we had some serious moments where I would just be honest with him, like you know, and he told me to being with you guys it makes me feel like I'm not native, of course, but it makes me feel connection
Mhm.
to native people because I have two native sons.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really incredible. That's I mean, and you're bringing up something really important here, like, you mentioned some of the slurs that you were talking that you recalled earlier, which
That wasn't
of
from
cour
him.
of
That was from my
course.
other parent.
Okay.
But
Yeah. And even
yeah,
still, I mean, I'm sure you got it in the community. I certainly did. When I was in elementary school, my mom's white and my dad's side is Mexican native as well. So
yes,
I grew up in a white neighborhood as well.
yes,
In fact, I was bounced all over the place, so I never really had any home. And I went to school in through my mom's neighborhood, so it was all well, some of the schools I changed schools quite a bit, but one of them was primarily a white school. Two of them were, and then one of them was, about 40% black and the rest were white. But when I was just a little kid in elementary school, like 8 years old, people were calling me same things that you mentioned: beaner, spick, wetback, border hopper, just little kids coming up with anything that they can to be creative. Julian, the Mexican burrito, just stuff like that. And it's like, wait a
you,
minute, where did that come from?
yeah,
How did these little kids, children, who couldn't point to Mexico on a map, who couldn't tell you what a Mexican is, where did this hatred, this anger come from? And so when you're talking about your relationship with your dad here, uh, I think we're really getting into something really important, which is stepping away from this programming that people I mean, I won't say just in this country, but it seems like all around the world, people are getting it from a very early age. Like I said, these were
yeah,
kids who had this fully developed at that point, this raw, blind hatred. And here, I mean, it sounds like inherently it's almost impossible to escape. Of course, your parents had it, but also we're seeing another side, which is there's a desire and then there's actions to step outside of that.
absolutely. There was a you know, there was a bridge that was built, and it was built with education. I saw it firsthand, real time with my father.
Mhm,
He had a even he was the more chill one out of the 2, but, you know, when we were going to powwows, when we were going to Mexico, when we were seeing the ruins, when we were going all over, and I was just curious and trying to learn more and more and more, he was right there with me. And, you know, my other father used to always say these horrible things. He tried to erase my identity. He'd say, "You're Portuguese. You just look like that because you're Filipino. You look like that because you're just Spanish and maybe you have like a little Arab in you or something." He's an older man. I think he adopted me when he was in his 50s. He's still alive. He's pretty old to these days. So he's very old school,
mhm.
back in the day, colonial prejudice,
Yeah,
mentality for sure. And, you know, I could tell that my other father, he would hear these things and he would just be like, because his name is Richard, he'd be like, "Richard, our kids are obviously native." Like I'd hear them argue about it too. He's like, "Why are you trying to get in the way of them learning about who they are? It's good. It's a
yeah,
good thing." And then he'd be like, "We don't want them working at Home Depot, right?" Like just there's some really just like it sounds absurd saying it out loud. Like, how could someone think like this? But people really do.
people really do,
People really
yeah,
freaking do. Like you were saying, you had, growing up in this environment,
mhm,
being place to place, people really are that low level of thought when it comes to, people they think as foreigner and immigrant, but there's deeper history there. We're way beyond that. We are
mhm,
indigenous people. We're native to this land, and that is something to be proud of.
yeah,
And what we're taught is Mel Gibson's Apocalypto. Most people think that okay, that's what they were back in the day.
mhm,
No, no, there's a lot of historical inaccuracies with that film. There's a lot of historical inaccuracies of what we've been taught. It's so sad. It's so, so very sad.
yeah,
Um, you know, they don't teach of our accomplishments. The largest pyramid in the world, the largest, isn't found in Egypt. Not to knock on any Egyptians, I
mhm,
respect their culture as well. It's found in Cholula, Mexico.
yeah, largest
It's found in
footprint,
the state of
mhm,
Puebla, and it's the largest pyramid in the world. When can we open up a textbook and we're taught on that? They don't teach a lot of our history. It's been suppressed intentionally.
yeah,
Again, to validate the narrative of manifest destiny, validate the narrative of encroaching on our lands and taking our resources, right?
yeah,
And, you know, hiding the theft. Because if I make you look like the criminal,
mhm,
if I make you look like the bad guy, then it validates my crimes. Because
yeah,
you deserved it. You had it coming, right?
exactly,
And
exactly,
that's the idea of the colonial mentality when it
yeah,
comes to white people and how they view us indigenous people. And I say us because if you're Mexican, the chances of you being indigenous is like 99, 98% if we look at the statistics. And that's a
yeah,
statistical fact. The majority of Mexicans are native.
yeah,
But again, you have this whole Latinidad, you have the Hispanic ideology that was violently imposed on our people for the last 500 years. And again, we're still trying to kind of wrestle our way out of this. Some of us, some of us also understand, and I think we need to realize it's also a privilege to understand, you know, for so many of our people, you know, their number one focus is trying to survive the day, trying to get by, trying to get enough food to live, right? Working and finding a job, hustling. They're caught so much in the hustle culture that learning about oneself seems to have limited value because they're just trying to survive in general.
it's a
And
great way to keep the information suppressed, to
yeah,
keep to keep the history suppressed is, yeah, when people are more focused on survival, you can't really explore these other things.
exactly.
not just
Yeah,
about being native at all. This is for everybody in terms of
absolutely.
exploring the potential of who we could truly be. Well, how can you do that when you're focused on, can I even survive?
Exactly. You know, and I think a lot of people think too, like it's all or nothing. Like
Hmm.
if I'm to decolonize, then no technological advancements of the modern era can be used. We have to go live back exactly to a T how our ancestors lived. But I think that's bullshit.
I think so too. I think that that's actually a way to continue to suppress
Exactly.
very
Yes.
specific things because I
Totally.
mean, when we look at the history of natives in Mexico, for instance, with the Mexica, what modern history really points to is things like human sacrifice. Oh,
Yeah.
they were marching people up painted in white up these pyramids, ripping out their beating hearts, then throwing them down the steps of the pyramid. That's only a small portion of the history. And when you look at it on a
Truly.
grand scheme, it really seems like this ideology was infecting not just this one area, but it was all around the world. For instance, you had the Spanish coming in and with guns and cannons and all this steel who were just shredding, sacrificing millions of humans. I
Absolutely.
in native Peru, they actually have a word, pichaco, which is the Spanish vampires who crave blood and they take the fat of human flesh to grease their swords. Yeah,
Wow.
there's really interesting conversations that are documented from the conquistadors, the first ones who are really coming in and massacring people. One, they were totally surprised, impressed, in awe of the architectural developments, the roads, the aqueducts, the engineering of all these cities. And they repeatedly said, wow, if they're as militarily advanced as their architecture, we're in big trouble. And then you have, so much that was happening here of this really twisting or like this dialogue between these ideologies, and it seemed to me like that really nasty war driven violence wasn't just local to the natives here, it was all over the world, and we can really
Yeah.
see that in the interactions of the conquerors when they were coming over. They talked a lot about that. And
Oh, totally.
we still see it today, just as you're talking about. If you can make somebody your enemy and you can justify your hatred, you can rationalize it against them, then you can continue doing whatever you want to them. You can take whatever you want from them. And this stuff is still happening to this very day. We see not just constant encroachment on treaties and reservations and land that's owned by natives, but I mean, just people like you and me on a daily basis. I mean, I had somebody who I was living in Portland, Oregon for 10 years, which West Coast, as liberal as progressive as it is, that's a
Yeah.
weird place when it comes to being native over
I
there.
was I was just in Portland 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
I know exactly what you're talking about,
you see
brother.
how violent it is over there?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Oh,
yeah,
yeah, and honestly, it's, like you said, it's as liberal as it can be, really, or as you would think, and, oh, man, yeah,
as
there was
hateful as
some
it can be too. Uh, it
hateful,
it's a strange
racist
place.
prejudice.
Yes, it's a
Prejudice,
strange
very
place.
prejudiced.
I believe that spaces hold memory. Like if you come into a room after somebody just had a fight, even if they've left, you go, whoa, what happened in here? Like you can really feel it. And the intensity of the thing that happened, all of that gets stored into that physical space. And I mean, Portland, Oregon, that's the end of the Oregon Trail right there.
Yeah,
And you can feel it in there. I had people, a group of people coming to my house for 2 years trying to get me out of that neighborhood. And they were coming with guns to my door,
wow.
threatening to kill me on a regular basis because they wanted to steal my assets. I mean, when have we heard this story before? I mean, literally playing
Yeah,
out in
literally.
real time. And
Yeah,
then what they did is they accused me of everything that they were doing in order to justify trying to steal my assets. And when they learned that they couldn't do that, that it wasn't going to work, then they called in favors. They had friends that were in the legal system there because these were, I mean, these were well off people. The family that really came after me, they owned 6 properties. And when they called in a favor, it was a prosecutor. They pressed charges against me, and I had to go to trial and stand on trial to face all of these while they were trying to throw me in jail for a minimum 6-year prison sentence. Thankfully,
disgusting,
thankfully,
disgusting.
all of that was washed away. But for 2 years, I had to deal with that. So this is what I'm talking about. Like this
Yeah.
stuff is still very much here. Actually, I don't like to go too far into giving these people too much energy, but I saw you make a post the other day and I saw one comment on it. I wanna just read this just so we can give people who are listening an idea of what people are saying here. Here's the comment. Can I share it with you real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
This guy says, so your post was about alligator Alcatraz here in Florida, which actually is where I'm living at now. I'm in
Oh,
Florida,
wow.
so that's interesting. And this guy says, natives deserve to be colonized, in my opinion. They are a bunch of philosophically retarded people. They only know how to use excuses as, quote, remedies, end quote, culture and other moral BS. I honestly masturbate to native genocide. That is what somebody posted 2 days ago.
Disgusting.
It's absolutely disgusting. And I
The
just
wave
want to,
of hate.
the wave of hate. And I just want to be clear too, that's only one part of what people are saying on your comments and what
Yeah.
people who interact with me. This is only one part, but again, it's a very heavy part.
Oh, it's triggering. You know, as soon as indigenous people, eh, want to speak on atrocities that are, the guilt is so high. This guilt is so heavy. It
Isn't it?
just drives them. It ignites a rage in them because
Yeah.
they, the weight of how deranged the situation truly is, how wrong, morally incorrect. And these people, they're praising Jesus in their bio and whatnot. Jesus would be standing with the oppressed.
Yeah.
Jesus would be, and I'm not a religious man by any sense, but knowing the religious figure of Jesus and how he's defined, he would be standing with the oppressed. He would be standing with indigenous people. He would be standing with Mexican people. He'd be standing with Central and South Americans who are stripped away from their families. He would be standing on the side of liberation for all people who have been oppressed in some form or another.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that the guilty conscience of the colonizer here is really it's really saying all it needs to say. It's disgusting. And this is the world where my child has to grow up in. And I'm not going to stop fighting for a better one. This all when I see those comments, it's motivation for me to keep going.
Hmm.
Um, you know, my daughter's name is Sewa, which means flower in my tradition, flower in Yorumnoki, the language of the indigenous people of Sinaloa, which
Hmm.
my people are. And you know, every time I hear that, it just drives me to keep pushing. And I think it
Yeah.
should be a call to action for all our brothers and sisters,
Yeah.
not one of violence, but one of truth, education.
Yeah.
That's what we're about here, to fight that off.
Yeah. And when I'm working with people in a therapeutic capacity, I always say that awareness is the prerequisite for choice. And
Yeah.
when you're bringing up like the idea of Christ, for instance, and what the true teachings, the true values of this religion are, yeah, it becomes super clear. Where things get really complex and really bizarre, though, is in Christian religion, the devil does not come to you as the devil. He doesn't come to you with severed heads and saying, let's go kill these guys over here. He presents himself as everything that you want. He presents himself as Christ, as the thing that you want to follow. There's this really interesting book called War God by Graham Hancock. It's a historical fiction book where he's
Okay.
talking about the conquest of Mexico, and he's looking at the supernatural, the spiritual aspect of who is influencing Moctezuma and who is influencing Cortez. And I mean, spoiler alert, it's the same person, it's the same entity. And here we can see how easily this demigod, I mean, in the Christian faith, it would be called the devil, can shapeshift and present himself as this thing that is actually, he presents as being a liberator, an agent for peace, an agent for love, but really the actions are quite the contrary. And I think we see this everywhere. I'm willing to bet that that person who made that post that I was, or that comment that I was referencing just a minute ago, I bet that's a religious person. I meet so many of them, and they
It
talk about
usually
this
is.
this
I hate to
spiritual
say it.
warfare. Yeah, it really is. So I think, we've really got to be aware of what we're really believing in and what we're really following. Like, let's be honest. Are we really following the teachings of Christ? Are we really following the teachers of these gods that we claim to want to follow? Or are we following the teachings of the war god? Because when we're talking about genocide and colonization, oppression, and all these really harsh means, that's not a teaching of compassion and connection. So I think we really need to look at that honestly, and take a truthful look at who we are really following and what kind of people we're becoming.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There's so much hypocrisy with our situation.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's really is an uphill battle. And, I really commend what you're doing with mental health. Um, just shedding a light on that for people to see because, oh oh boy, our people need it.
Yeah.
We need it. We really do need it.
Oh, do we
Especially
ever?
navigating, I'm sure you're familiar with intergenerational trauma.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I believe that 100%.
Brother, let me tell you, when I was on trial
Yeah.
and it was my time to testify, my trial was 4 days long. So, I
Oh,
mean, these people,
goodness.
like
Yeah.
when Hunter Biden goes on trial and it's like 2 days long, my trial was longer and more intense than that. And so when I was testifying, I brought some tobacco up there with me. And I couldn't have any of that showing. I couldn't do anything in front of the jury because, they can't be influenced by that. But I had this really deep meditation the night before, and this was one of the first times that my ancestors really came to me and really spoke to me, and they were right there with me, and I had such power standing with me on that stand, to the point where I almost made that prosecutor cry and run out of the room stomping her feet. She's screaming at me red in the face because I'm just pointing out how stupid all the shit she's saying is.
Yeah.
You know, um, and one of the things that I was shown, that I saw so clearly and I understood, I don't have much of a relationship with my family. We're so fragmented and broken, but I saw what my grandparents had gone through and what my great grandparents had gone through and their parents and so on, all through the generations. It was this exact same dynamic, this exact same pain of being attacked for being at your own home, being at the place where you live, for being here while these other people are coming wanting what you got, what they're trying to take it from you. And I saw that I had been given this wonderful pain, this wonderful pattern that all of my generations had gone through. And it was up there for me to stand and face it and interact and engage with it and participate in it and set boundaries with it and become, victorious in a way, win this conflict in a way that was not involving violence or hatred. And in that moment where they were all with me, in terms of working with intergenerational trauma, the sense that I got there was I really was able to put to rest a lot of the pain that all of these generations had carried. It was incredible. It was so beautiful in that moment. Would I want to do it again? Would I love to get those 2 years back of time, my presence, my emotions, my mentality? but there was a payoff for it. It was there for a reason. It was so hard, and it's a lot like you're talking about, what your dad was saying. It's so hard. It's an uphill battle, and wow, there's some incredible things that happen here.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Um, oh, wow. That's awesome, man. That gives me shivers. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah. I mean, it was incredible. I don't really talk about it too much because I mean, there are people who understand. It was funny. 2 day, the day after the trial, one of my neighbors, another Native woman, she invited me over, and she's really intuitive. She's really in tune with things that are non-material. She's perceptive. Her senses are so sensitive that she can see things that our normal senses are blind to. Might call her a psychic. I know that's kind of triggering for a lot of people. So whatever you want to make of it. And
Yeah.
I think she's a beautiful, wonderful person, and she wanted to come over and she wanted to do what she calls a reading, where she sees, what's going on with me right now post trial. And she said, I didn't tell her anything about the trial. I didn't give her any information. But she goes, you have a lot of people standing with you right now. And she goes, you have ancestors with you who have gone through this exact same thing through all these generations. And there's so much peace and joy that's happening right now because of the way that you turned and faced this pain where it would have been so easy to run away. And trust me, I thought about running away many times. But yeah, it was just so incredible to see how much power there was there and how much was happening through all of this process that, yeah, I mean, you can't buy that experience. And it really changed who I am as a person. And I think it really affected my generations that preceded me.
And now for your future generations, you're a veteran, man. You really stood there in a fight, man, in a spiritual war. You were up on that stand, and, any other of our people who go through a similar situation, you can tell them what you did. And you actually have a lived experience of coming out on the other side on a somewhat positive note, and
Yeah.
that's freaking awesome, man. I
Yeah.
respect that.
And that's why I was so drawn to your work is because, again, on the one hand, there's just so much hatred. There's so much resistance. You just make a post saying things like, we're not immigrants if we've been here for 500 plus years. As long as there's been documentation, we've been here. So we've been here much longer than that. Or saying this whole, Clovis first theory of Native Americans crossing the land bridge. It's BS. There's settlements that are here for over 100,000 years, and we find them all over the place.
And
And
that, yeah, that how long we've been here, it keeps, with
yeah,
the more and more findings there is, it keeps getting pushed back
every
farther and
time. Yeah.
farther and farther back,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. And when you make those posts, just talking about the truth that's coming out that humanity is much older, not just Native American
Yeah.
culture, but humanity in general is much older and much more mysterious than we believed. Again, we start to see some weird confluence of agendas that are here, which there's not just the repression of native cultures. There's a repression of human history in general. Ask what happened before the pyramids in school, and they'll tell you we don't talk about that. And they're stuck on the pyramids are 2,000 years old. The Sphinx is 2,500 years old max. But then they look at the water erosion on it, and they look at the limestone and all the bedrock that's there, and they're saying, "Whoa, no, this is predating the last ice age." So now we're looking at what cultures were here before the last fall, the last cataclysm. And we can see that in the Native Americas here, these cultures preceded that by tens, hundreds of thousands of years. So maybe this hatred, this repression, this wanting to wash away any sort of native culture is also intertwined with trying to erase a longer history of who humans truly are. And
Absolutely.
I think this gets into what you were saying, which is everybody's got some native lineage. Everybody's native to somewhere.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and this is about recovering that for everybody.
And I feel like once we, at least the basics, I'm not saying I don't wanna generalize and say all indigenous culture is the same. It's
Mhm.
not. There's differences, diversity, nuances, etcetera, but there there is a general way of being that is connected to nature. There's a spiritual element. We're connected to the world, the water, the minerals, etc. of the earth, and living with the animals, and not as us over them, but in many cultures, especially in California, the native cultures that I grew up around, the idea was always our relatives, right? Our four-legged relatives, uh, grandfather raven, right?
Yeah.
Our uncle coyote, right?
Right.
Etc. They're talked as, they're talked of as family, right?
Mhm.
As family. So this idea that we're superior to them, and we have to domesticate nature, the animals, etc., is very
Yeah.
it's very harmful to not only our relatives but to ourselves, because we're all part of the same family.
That's right.
We're killing our own family here,
Killing ourselves.
and we're killing ourselves.
Yeah.
Exactly. And they're
I
still doing it in the Amazon,
everywhere.
Ecuador,
Everywhere right
everywhere,
now. I mean,
everywhere.
I'm dry I went on this bike trip, in 2015, 2016, 8 months. I crossed the country, and I stayed in numerous reservations. I went through numerous forests, and what I was shocked to see was just how much devastation is intentionally going around, just clear cutting any forest that's left over. Right now, I think there's less than 4% of pristine natural forest left in the United States. All of it's been clear cut. I see it here in Florida. The development, what they call it, just this complete destruction of any sort of ecological practice. This is the norm. It is the rule right now, and they're replacing it with these cookie cutter little subdivisions that nobody wants to live in, and people can't even afford to live in anymore. So I think again we're getting into some really big conspiracy here, which is all of these native cultures around the world, as diverse, as independent as they were, they had very similar values. There's a thread that
Yeah.
connects through them. And one of them is a connection to the world that we live in, being
Yep.
connected to the environment, to the water, to the air, to all of the animals that we share this world with, to walk together on this road of life with each other, looking out for each other. And again, here we see this demiurge, this really destructive tendency that is really wanting to destroy all of that. So, in terms of the why there's so much hatred being pushed towards anybody who is wanting to preserve any sort of native culture, which would involve being in tune with the earth, we can see here there's a very strong agenda against it. It's everywhere.
Absolutely. What I'd like to see is, especially for people, you know, Mexican people, Chicanos, Central South Americans in this regard.
Hmm.
Um, I look to the communities in Canada, the indigenous communities, and there's one in particular that I see that we can really learn from, especially navigating our identity and how we can do it in maybe more of a balanced, healthier way, and acknowledging our indigenous roots. It would be the Métis people of Canada. Are you familiar with the Métis?
Mm-mm.
So basically, they're a community. So Métis in French means mixed, and it's referencing the fact that they're a mixture of French and indigenous, of the
Hmm.
indigenous tribes there in Canada. And mestizo, the word mestizo in Mexico, Central South America, means mixed, and it typically in Spanish refers to the admixture of Native American and European roots.
Yeah.
But what the Métis have done is they have created their own unique culture based around both their roots, while heavily acknowledging that they are indigenous to the land they are at, which they are on, the Americas. And they have created their own culture, and they're recognized by the Canadian government as an indigenous group, as a
Hmm.
native people. And I hope to at least try to spearhead something like that for Latin American people who are
Yeah.
of indigenous ancestry, so we can get to a point where we are really balanced and aware of our native roots without um, what had happened with the blanqueamiento, which is basically the idea of whitening our identities,
Hmm.
nationalizing our identities. Because people say, "Oh, I'm Mexican. I'm half Mexican." And I understand why they say that, but Mexican isn't a race. It's
Hmm.
like being an American. It's a nationality. So if you're a citizen of Mexico, you're technically a Mexican. You could be Middle Eastern, African, white, born in Mexico, have the citizenship to Mexico, and be considered a Mexicano, be
Hmm.
considered a Mexican. But it's been racialized, and I think a lot of people don't realize that it was intentionally racialized
Yeah.
in order to again swap the indigenous identity for a nationalistic one
Yeah.
that had some indigenous elements, right? But again, was largely curated by Spaniards.
Hmm. Yeah, this is getting really interesting in terms of where what do we do moving forward? So I think a lot of people accuse anybody who stands up for any sort of native restoration or native reclamation, in a sense, as being racist against white people. Um, just like how in Mexico, there's almost always this demand for a formal apology from Spain, as in, like, the Spanish are the villains here. They were the conquerors, they were the oppressors, and there's a lot of truth to that.
Yeah.
But a lot of us are mixed blood,
Yes.
so for me, I have European lineage and I have native lineage. I have both of them.
Yeah.
So how can I be racist or hateful towards what had happened, with European colonization, when that blood runs through me too? So then I hate part of myself. I'm ashamed of who I am in that sense.
And that's
And
not healthy.
it's not healthy. So again, when you're talking about these cultures, there's a mix that's happening here, and there's a lot of mixing that's going on with all sorts of different cultures interacting with each other. So then the question becomes, well, how can we start to move towards, as you've been talking about, these practices, these beliefs, the integrity of what it means to live in harmony and in balance and be stewards to water and air and earth and to all of our co-companions in this world, while not having to get into this blind or shameful, I won't use blind, I'll say shameful hatred of these people versus these people, because a lot of it has been mixed together. A lot of us are mixed blood at this point. A lot of us have all these in us. So, what are you thinking here in terms of what does this look like moving forward? How do we start to get back to those roots while also taking what we have now?
I would say it goes back to that thread you were talking about,
Hmm.
right? How all indigenous cultures, whether you be in Europe, Africa, Asia, etc., Polynesia, there's a carryover of living in balance with nature, the earth, and having self-respect and self-love
Yeah.
with community, right? At the end of the day, and your community can be, I have relatives who are white. I have relatives who are black, who are native,
Hmm.
and living in terms as a community in that sense, communal identity, right? Um, I do think that to a certain degree, at least as far as I speak, it's important to acknowledge your Indigenous American identity because there's been so much done to try to attack and desecrate us,
Hmm.
you know. But again, we can be balanced about it. And again, that's why I was using the Métis people as an example because they do it. Many of us are mixed,
Yeah.
and their idea of being indigenous and being mixed blood is, you know, acknowledge that if you have indigenous ancestry, you're a native, you're a Métis, whether that be half, a quarter, three quarters, it doesn't matter. As long as you have the ancestry, you are a Native American person. You're indigenous American. You are Métis. And it's not ignoring the fact that they're French. Their language is called Michif, which is a mixture of, I believe it's Cree and French. And it's their own culture built off of what had happened with
Hmm.
with history, right? The two peoples um, becoming one, and they became, a contemporary indigenous community. And I think that is crazy to some people because when they think indigenous and contemporary, you know,
Mhm.
eh, people think those two are mutually exclusive,
Yeah.
right? But no, we indigenous people have evolved even before Europeans were here. You know, if we look at the linguistic history of just the history of the indigenous people of Mesoamerica, a lot of them came from the north, like higher north. We're already in North America, but just higher north, right? They say that an ancient group of Shoshonians, the Shoshone people, migrated down. And there's a lot of different theories, but that's the
Mhm.
one that seems to me that I think I resonate with at this point in time. And that they started creating a more contemporary culture to their belief as they shifted away from. I think that's completely okay. I think
Mhm.
cultures evolve. I think people evolve, philosophies evolve.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that what the Métis did, there's no reason why Mexican people and Central South Americans can't do in their within regards to their own respective histories. I think that would
Right.
be fantastic to see. I think it would be a form of racial healing,
Mhm.
and I think it would be very balanced.
Yeah, this blending and creating something new. A lot of people, I think we have this knee jerk fear reaction when we're talking about native restoration or reconnected with native roots, which is we have to go back to how things were before the Western expansion. And I don't think that that's possible. I mean, this brings in a philosophical question here that I'd love to explore with you, actually.
Yeah.
Um, so we're seeing this dynamic happening all around the world, especially in our country. Here in Florida, they have these quite frequently. They have these hunts for invasive species like pythons and iguanas, for instance. So the governor Ron DeSantis was just doing a python hunt. They go out and they kill all these pythons and they turn them into shoes and bags and stuff like that. And the logic here is they're destroying very fragile, delicate ecosystems. Rightfully so. I mean, these pythons have no natural predators here. They'll eat gators, 6 foot gators getting swallowed by pythons. They're wiping out all sorts of very fragile native species that are here. So what do we do in these situations? I mean, right now they're doing the horse roundup they're doing it in Florida. They're getting rid of a bunch of wild horses that are here. And they're doing it out west too, in Nevada and in California, I believe. They're rounding up thousands of wild horses, taking them off the land. I guess we need more data centers. So the philosophical question is, at what point do invasive species then become the new native species? And how do we start to blend and strengthen the habitat in which we all live in so we can coexist? Or can we? Does it have to be we have to remove the or the invasive species? Because if that's the ideology, then where does that line stop? Do we just say it's with snakes? Do we just say it's with iguanas and with animals, or do we also have to apply that to humans as well? I don't have an answer. I just like to explore this.
I would say that I would say I personally respect both sides.
Hmm.
I do. I personally respect both sides. I understand why because there's a lot of native activists that I engage with that are very like firm, like they don't want anything to do with the white man.
Of course.
They want their own land away. They
And
want to
that's
be
and
left
that's
alone.
reasonable, and we can
It's
understand why.
extremely reasonable.
Yeah.
I understand it. I totally get it. Totally get it. But I also get the other side too. I also totally understand why some may, they have friends or relatives, family who are white and, they want to, they don't want anything to change in that regard. They want to be with their families and they
Yeah.
love their families and whatnot. And that's totally valid too. It just depends on the individual. What I'm against is just harming, violence. I don't think that necessarily has to be our way in the present day.
Mhm.
Like, we don't have to go and violate or harm anyone, and I only believe in that in self-defense. If there is a neo-Nazi group trying to harass a Native woman and you're around, I'm definitely gonna step in, and I'm gonna try
Yeah.
my best to defend our people no matter what. And I encourage that for all Native people. We have to look after our people because
Yeah.
we've been disrespected and desecrated for a very long time.
Right.
And I'm all about self-defense. I'm not about attacking people just out of hatred.
Mhm.
But if they're attacking us out of hatred and we're left, we have to do what we have to do for self-defense purposes
Yeah, and then when we
and
have, like
self-preservation.
exactly, and so when we have this constant expansion of development, here in Florida, they have this saying that the most threatening invasive species are the developers. Right? And so, I mean, yeah, the pythons, they're tearing up environments and entire species are threatened. But I think the bigger threat is the constant encroachment of this way of thinking in terms of development, subdivisions, cookie cutter, concrete everywhere, just destroying everything in its path. And so, how can we start to defend ourselves? And I think that this isn't just a native issue. Because I know it's
It's
not
it's really not, yeah.
all the people around me here in Florida, I won't say all of them. Some people are cheering, like, yeah, give us some more strip malls. I want that cheap coffee and, a bigger highway. Some people are really in favor of that. But I think the vast majority of people are really starting to stand up and say, no more. We can't do this anymore. And we really need to find some sort of way to have, as much as we don't like it in some senses, boundaries where certain ideas and customs can't come into this area, where we just have some sort of protected place where we can exist and with our ideas of protection and thriving in harmony with an ecosystem and building ways of interacting with each other where ideas of destruction and violence can't come in. What do you think about all that?
I think that the way of the colonizer is to domesticate the land, take
Hmm.
control of it. And I think that the indigenous life ways is always semi-cultivation to work with the land, right?
Hmm.
And I think that a good approach is a balanced approach in which we can learn to have the land and nature thrive in a way where we can still have some of the conveniences. I mean, it's really, I think people think so black and white and all or nothing, and it doesn't have to necessarily be that way. I think we can have um, technological advancement that works hand in hand with nature
Sure.
and actually even work with indigenous people.
Hmm.
They are not mutually exclusive. Like, again, there's so much of this thought, okay, indigenous is backward, indigenous is regressive. That's what native people are. And they
Sure.
have nothing to bring to the table that is sustainable or healthy for anyone, blah, blah, blah. That's just on, whoop de doo nonsense.
Hmm.
But it really isn't. There's so much truth to our life ways. And I think that we can still evolve and try to aim for better, but maybe doing it from an indigenous approach. One that actually where we're not raping the land,
Yeah.
one where we're not actually destroying ecosystems, one where we're actually working with, if not improving these things.
Hmm.
Totally. And if we have that mentality that, hey, if we grow and make the world a better place, nature, that we ourselves will become more balanced and better, then I think we're onto something. And I think that's totally viable. They call it indigenous futurism. And I think that no one talks about it enough.
Hmm.
Totally cool concept. I think that if we really focused on indigenous futurism, right? And I don't mean it just from a Native American exclusive viewpoint, but if we looked at it from, uh, you know, the indigenous life ways that we can take from the globe, right? The global communities and cultures, then we will really be onto something good.
Yeah.
If this is the supreme, you know, the white supremacist idea, then okay, then let's see that supremacy. Let's see you build with the land and build in a very coherent, helpful, positive way, you know?
Mhm.
Actually,
Yeah.
maybe talk to indigenous people
Wouldn't that be
because that would
nice?
help.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah,
It's funny enough, quick story. I used to work at this really big university and hospital in Oregon. It was the largest one over there. And when all of the racial stuff was going on, like early 2020, they started having these meetings to talk about racism in our workplace. I looked at the stats. It was 97% white women in my department. I was one of three people who were not white, and I was one of like three men in the whole place, too. And
yeah.
so they're having this meeting where they're going to discuss what racism looks like in our workplace. And so you would think that I would be one of three people that would be invited and encouraged to speak. And so, they kind of opened it up to the floor. And of course, a bunch of the people who work there are talking. And first chance I got, I jumped on and I talked for probably about 20, 30 seconds. And somebody actually jumped on and said, Julian, why don't you let other people here have a conversation about that? So what she basically said was, "Shh, shh, shh, be quiet. The white people are having a conversation about racism now. You be quiet over here." I quit that job shortly after that. But this
Yeah.
is what I see so much of is even the dialogue and the ideas are very exclusive here. In Oregon, where they were legalizing psychedelic services, not psychedelic therapy, but psychedelic services, which is something that my ancestors have practiced for as far back as we have any documentation for. No native input was ever actually encouraged or welcomed. And when my voice and other natives who had been a part of this practice and have trained our entire lives for this, when we wanted to have some input, it was, we'll listen to you, but none of it's going to be actually incorporated or taken in. So this is again a very important thing is whose ideas are we really grabbing onto and can we actually have a diversity of ideas? And the other part to it is yeah, how can we start to have those ideas when so much right now is based on an opposing, conflicting idea of domestication of the land or control and domination of it? Again, just the raw clear cutting of everything that's here and replacing it with the cookie cutter ticky tacky houses and planting, the brand new invasive trees to go along and give yourself a little tiny bit of greenery. Most of the times there's no greenery there. So how can we take steps towards having, I don't know, pockets or places where we can interact and have this type of community and this style of living when there's such a strong force and domination for the destruction and this other domination or domestication that we were talking about?
I would say, it's important. I mean, I always say it's education.
Yeah.
I always say it's education and to weaponize inclusivity. I think that to a certain extent, if you can have them understand, you can really make a solid difference.
Yeah.
But I also think that it's important for all of us to get together, all of us like-minded folks.
Mhm.
Um, there's been so much done to really, there's a common saying when I was living in East Los, which is a heavily Mexican area. Uh, the number one enemy of a Mexican is another Mexican,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
And we have to peel back the layers of that. You know, what is
Yeah.
it that's so triggering about seeing our own brothers and sisters, right?
Mhm.
This is I mean, because right there, East Los, that's Native Central right there. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Everyone's like, oh, I never seen a real Native American. Well, go down to East Los. You're going to see a bunch of Native Americans right then and there.
Mhm.
You just don't identify them as Native American because, there's so much ignorance out there. But those are indigenous people.
Yeah.
They are, and they are waking up. There's a really good quote by John Lennon, of all people. John Lennon, sketchy figure, great musician. We're looking past all his personal life, but he did say this one thing. He said, people think there's only a few Indians left. but that's a big lie. There's
Yeah.
Indians all over the continent.
Yeah.
And he even said that he wouldn't be surprised if Africans, joined them in the fight for liberation.
Hmm.
And I'm definitely misquoting that, but he did talk about how, people think that Native people are such a minority, but we are still the majority of the continent when we really look at indigenous descendants. Damn, we are still the majority. That's why when I say education is liberation, that's what I mean. If we had even just half of our population understand and recognize themselves as indigenous people, like truly understood the fact that they are, damn, damn, wow.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that in a violent sense. I
Hmm.
just mean it in like the change that would ensue with that
Yeah.
would be monumental, you know? Because it's not like uh, we're this tiny little population of people, and it's just that there's been such an identity colonization of our identities,
Hmm.
right, and manipulation of our self-image that you know we've been tricked, we've been duped to believe that we're not here, but we are here, we are here, we are here. Most of those Mexicans you see in the field who are working in the farms are indigenous people. They're Native
Yeah.
American. They're
Hmm.
as American as you can get. They are indigenous to this land, and they've been here for thousands. We've been here for thousands upon thousands of years, and yeah, that's why I say education is truly power. We are not the minority. They call it the movement itself is called waking the sleeping giant, because
Hmm.
we are the sleeping giant. We're just in a slumber right now. But when we wake up to the truth of our race, where brown pride really comes from. What is brown pride? That's not from Spain. Brown pride is not from Spain. Brown pride is from the Americas.
Yeah.
Brown pride is from this continent, North, Central, and South America, the Caribbean islands included, all the way from Greenland down to the tip of Chile and Argentina. That is the Americas. And once we really understand that truth and breathe it, drink it in all the way, damn, some real change is going to happen. Because a lot of when people think of the indigenous erasure, they always think that, okay, it's a community of people that is just like this big and they've just been exterminated. Native Americans don't even exist anymore, not even in Mexico. The whole damn country is Native American. The whole freaking, like, but again, this takes the veil of colonization, and it's really going against what we've been taught. It's really out
Yeah.
there to most people. But when you really look at it, the demographics, the history, there's a name for what they did to our people. They even teach, like, it's not taught in like regular general history, but it does get taught. It's called the
Hmm.
blanqueamiento.
Yeah.
It's called the nationalism. You know
Hmm.
that in the census in Mexico in 1930, we had 75% of the population being able to speak um, Native American languages, indigenous languages.
Wait, when was
But
this?
this was the Mexican census.
Hmm.
Actually, I'm sorry, it was 1820.
Yeah.
My bad. I'm getting that mixed up with some another
Hmm.
fact that I'm going to share in a little bit. But so basically, we had in 1820, 75% of the indigenous population, no, of the population in Mexico spoke an indigenous language,
Hmm.
meaning that the majority of the great great grandparents of Mexicanos were speaking Native American languages, right? And then we also look at, for example, in 1930, uh, there was a census that basically, what was it? Oh, that the majority of 30% of the indigenous communities just disappeared, and it was like white.
Yeah.
But what happened was under Jose Vasconcelos, right, who was the Secretary of Education for Mexico, he wanted to make Mexico appear more civilized on paper. And he essentially erased the identities of 30%
Yeah.
of the population that
Sure.
was indigenous. So what we think Mexico's indigenous population is so much bigger than what we've been taught. And the same
Right.
can be said with Peru, Guatemala, Paraguay, Uruguay, Belize,
Mhm.
etc. These countries are way more indigenous than what we've been taught. There has been so much lies,
Yeah.
it's ridiculous. You know,
Yeah.
the Secretary of Education, by the way, Jose Vasconcelos, he came up with the idea of La Raza Cosmica, really popular ideology amongst Chicanos in the United States and in Mexico as well. We're the cosmic race, right? Um, where he gets his ideologies from, the guy who wrote that, it was again Jose Vasconcelos, the Secretary of Education for Mexico, and he was a Nazi. He was a literal Nazi. He was a literal Nazi. He wrote for a Nazi propagandist magazine called Timon, right? It was called Timon, and it was in Latin America.
Mhm.
It was in Latin America. He wrote for it, and this was again the head honcho who was in charge for education in Mexico. The idea was, and some of his quotes are so brutal, man. Like, it's
Hmm.
like the Indian has no other way but the way paved by Latin civilization. The Indian, the goal of the Mexican people is to Latinize the people so they have a European image of themselves, and they have been largely successful. This was the idea of, again, a lot of the people in charge of the education, political. We think of Mexico as a brown country, but it really has been, it is a settler colonial country if we look
Yeah.
at the history. You know, yes, there had been some brown people who were presidents, but at the end of the day, the people who were in the cabinets, like the high ups, were all of Spanish origin
Mhm.
from Spain. And they had, ideas to whiten the race, Latinize the race, erase the indigenous idea, erase the indigenous self image of our people.
Yeah.
It's all attacking the self image.
Mhm.
If I can make you think that you're something else, then it's easier for me to take your land
Totally.
and exploit your resources because you don't
Mhm.
even know what you are. If I can just cut that right off the bat and make you think that you're something else,
Mhm.
right? Or I paint the image that you are one of us to a certain extent, you know? The idea of mestizo is to be, above native but below European. So that was that place you could escape to, right? That identity placeholder you could escape to where, you know, you could sit there and not be persecuted for being indigenous. And this was even in California, there was the one-fourth Indian law, right? So basically, if you were only 25% indigenous, right? Or less, at least 20% indigenous, you would be unable to testify in court against someone of full European ancestry. And in the state of California, you were considered equivalent to a full blooded native person
Hmm.
because of this law. It
Mhm.
was in 1852, I believe. And this law was freaking savage, man. They call us the savages. This law was savage. They had
Yeah.
us basically, are you familiar with the story of Joaquin Morieta?
Mm-mm.
So basically, Zorro was inspired by this indigenous Mexican man. His name was Joaquin Morieta. He was from Sonora. And during the California gold rush, right, he had a wife. He had, and he struck gold. He literally found a ton of gold during the California gold rush. He migrated from Sonora to California. And when he did, a lot of the Anglo people who were miners at the time looked at him in envy. They didn't think that a Mexican knew what to do with that type of wealth. And what did they do? They went to his house. They stole his gold. They raped his wife. They beat her nearly to death. And they took his brother to town square and they hung him. They lynched him. They
Mhm.
murdered his brother.
Yeah.
And what he did was he wasn't trying to go for vengeance. That wasn't his not what he was trying to do at first, like with violence. He he wanted to testify in court, but because of this law, the one-fourth Indian law, he was considered an Indian because he was Mexican. And
Yeah.
Mexicans carry Indian blood. They're considered indigenous people. Yes, in California, this was an actual thing. And he was unable to testify. So what he did was he just really he lost it, man. He rightfully so, in my opinion, because he really stuck it to them. He hunted each one of them down, and uh he sought justice. He hunted them down and murdered each one of these people who had encroached onto his land, his property, and desecrated his wife and murdered his brother.
Yeah.
And I think that stories like this should be taught in the United States. They should be
Yeah.
taught in California. It's not taught. Peter Burnett, the first governor of California, he wanted the mass extermination for uh, indigenous people. This was put into law to
Hmm.
exterminate Native people.
Yeah.
Peter Burnett. And, you know, when they think, when Native people think that there's no reason to be angry, then I tell them to look into the history. There's always a damn reason to be angry and upset. But of course, you gotta live in balance too. You gotta heal. But I'm just saying,
You're
if
bringing
we're,
up
if we're
something
look,
very important. You're bringing up something very important, which is the rage,
yeah,
the rightful rage that exists. So in Israel and Palestine, for instance, they're always, oh, October 7th, right? The unprovoked attacks from Gaza into Israel, and now Israel is now justified to exterminate and wipe out millions of people because of that. Well, if we look at the events that led up to this, of course there were attacks. Of course, because it didn't start on October 7th. There was a long history of repeated brutal attacks and conflicts, just as you're talking about it happening here in California. That rage, where does it go? When I'm working with somebody on an individual level, almost every single person that I've ever worked with has big, massive emotions that they don't know what to do with. At some point, they had these big emotions like anger, and they didn't know what to do with it. And if they had the anger, it would have led to more consequences. So what do you do if you're a kid and your parents aren't showing up for you the way that you need them to, or you're living in a society where all these injustices are happening and you have all this rage? But if you express the anger, you express the rage, you get punished. You get more consequences, you get harmed even more. Well, the only thing that you can do is stuff it down, bury it, but it doesn't go away. It stays there and it festers. And
yeah,
then it comes out in an explosive, unstructured way.
yep,
Just like the October 7th attacks in Israel and Gaza. And then when we then repress that rage even more with force, is it fuels it and it gets bigger and bigger. It's like a pressure cooker where we keep turning the temperature up and we keep adding things to it. Eventually, it's going to pop and explode. So we've really got to figure out a way to address all of this anger and rage that I certainly carry. I have it. I have to interact with it every single day. There's not a single day that goes by where I can't say, "Oh, there it is again. Hey, there's my old friend." But I can turn and face it. I've worked with it. I know how to engage with that rage. I know how to express it in constructive ways. But the vast majority of people don't. And I think this is what you're talking about here with the suppression of Native identity and Native history, which is, of course, there's rage. Of course, there's anger because this is still happening on a daily basis, as we were just talking about things that have happened to me and things that people are saying and doing to you too. It's still here right now. And so, whether it's in Mexico and America or it's the repression of Palestinians or anywhere around the world, there's this great desire to suppress that identity, to suppress that history, because if that history is known, well, what about all these big emotions, this pain that's been carried through the generations? My parents carry this. My grandparents carry it. My great grandparents carry it. It's been handed through all of these, and now I carry it. What do we do with it? Well, we've got to learn how to work with that, but we've also got to find a place in society where these emotions can be accepted, where we can learn to recognize and identify, like, oh, yeah, of course. Black rage is a thing. Of course it is. Look at the way that Black culture has been suppressed and oppressed all throughout the history of this country and how it continues to be so. Of course, those cultures, those communities are going to be violent. We have to address the rage that we're carrying, and we have to find a place for it to exist in society where we can say, here's this terrible rage and it's justified and it's here for a reason. Can we make a place for it? Can we find a way for it to exist in a constructive way? Can we find outlets for it to be not just seen, but accepted and valued? Can we listen to it? Can we interact with it? And can we find some way to soothe this rage? If we can't do that, well, then we're just going to keep seeing this blanketing and this repression of all the history, all the identity, all the customs, because there's a major fear of all of that rage coming up. And I think that's a big thing that we've got to address too is the fear.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, yeah, it's finding a productive way for it, you know. Um, some that might look like doing a sport of some kind, art, I guess. It's a hard one. It's
Yeah.
definitely a hard one. You know, for me, I definitely I use it to educate. I
Yeah.
use it with the reels. I use it with right now I am working on a book. Publisher has reached out to me, so I'll be writing more in depth about you know, my beliefs and what I've learned in a book. So that'll be out soon. And yeah, it's a good way to unpack.
Yeah. Expression of some sort. And I think it's got to be really intentional. Like if
Yeah.
like
Oh
you
yeah.
talking about your experiences and your beliefs and ideas, this is really important. We see so many musicians, so many artists, so many writers who are chronic and suicidally depressed because they have all of those deeply buried and repressed emotions, whether it's rage or fear or deep despair and sadness that hasn't been addressed and it hasn't been seen. And the way that they express that is through their art, through their music. But that is like it can be a catharsis, like a pressure relief valve where it's just enough. I think we've really got to get to the point where we can see here's this rage, here's this shame, here's this thing that I carry, and here's this thing that you carry, and here's this thing that we're all carrying. Can we connect with each other over this? Can we find a way to accept it? Like that guy that posted that comment that I talked about earlier, that really disgusting one. I
Oh yeah.
masturbate to native genocide. There were very big emotions in that. There was
I'm sorry, my wife just walked in.
it's okay. Yeah, that would be a weird thing to just walk into and hear.
Yeah, she just walked into that and she was just like, "Give me a straight look."
Yes. And that
But
that
yeah,
that
no, I hear
that
you. That's disgusting. It's yeah,
and it's disgusting, and it has not just disgust, but there's so much rage and fear that's built into what that person was saying. I think we really gotta find a way for all of us on all sides of the table here. That guy is carrying some things. I wonder what led him to that point. I wonder what really contributed to those experiences that led him to be
some of these
so
people are just
hateful.
so sick, man.
Yeah, it's sick, and it's
Sick.
I don't think that we're
Sickness.
it's a sickness, exactly. It's not like we're judging them and criticizing or trying to punish them. It's something
Yeah.
happened here that really hurt them and harmed them. And just as we wanna talk about, like,
Yeah.
native rage, there's another side to this too.
Yeah, absolutely. Being, you know, coming from colonizers,
Mhm,
um, or having what Malcolm X would call a beneficiary status off of
mhm,
the genocide of groups of people from
yeah,
all around the world, you know? Uh, they're definitely I do 100% believe that it is a guilt thing, you know, to some degree. I do believe that it just, because I remember with my own father, um, bringing some of this up, like the atrocities of just how many Native American peoples died,
Hmm.
you know, across the board with the genocide that took place. It's the largest one in recorded human history, arguably, but it is at least in the top 3, definitely. And I'm not trying to play some sort of oppression Olympics here when I say that. I'm just going off of like the numbers. It
Yeah,
was devastating how many of our people had died. And we're still here, but it's it's shocking. And you say these numbers out loud, you always hear the defense from not all white people, but a lot of white people who they struggle with this.
yeah.
They struggle with the truth, you know, the
Fragility.
fragility, very fragile. And there's this, for many, it's an explosive emotional outrage when
Hmm.
they see, especially my videos when I'm out there, as a native person discussing the subject matter, and not only discussing what has happened to our people here in the Americas, but what also has happened to other indigenous peoples like in India
Hmm.
or Polynesia, even in Europe.
Yeah,
And when you bring up the Carfax, some people just don't want to see it. It's
that's
just
right.
a hard one. It's very hard. But I love what you're saying because I'm not trying to necessarily hate on white people.
Hmm.
That's not my goal.
We don't want to spread hate.
I don't. That's not our ways. Th- in my belief, that's not
Hmm.
our ways as Native people
Yeah,
to destroy, desecrate um, European people. I don't believe it. You know, I choose not to. I'm not going to subscribe to that low stance. I think that white people have, you know, they have beautiful culture in a lot of ways as well, and they have indigenous culture. We're all relatives of the same family, and I just hope that they some of my viewers can see who are white that this is just shedding a light on the history that has been suppressed or hidden or not talked about as much. And you know we really all are in this struggle together.
yeah.
you know we really are, uh
We really are.
especially the human experience in general.
Hmm.
I mean, it comes down to it.
Yeah,
There's there's what has happened, and then there's what we're all experiencing together. I think it need not be overthought. We really can build a bridge here. I
I
truly
think so
do.
too. Yeah. Honestly, Gabriel, I think that all these things that are happening on like a societal or global level, those are like an external manifestation or an external expression of the things that are happening internally.
Yeah,
So there's a great schism, a great divide, and this not knowing what to do with feelings and emotions and patterns. So when I work with somebody, usually one of the first things that I do is I identify what are the patterns that are at play and where do they come from? Why are they here? What purpose do these patterns serve? What kind of
yeah,
preservation, adaptation, defense are they actually doing? What are the unmet needs? And so when we're working with somebody who gets triggered by just talking about the history here, that's probably an indication that there's something internally that they can't accept. Can they accept a pain? Can they work with pain? Can they be with discomfort? Can they recognize and identify pain and say, oh, here's something that needs my attention? Or do they avoid it? Because if you avoid it, when I work with, again, somebody on an individual level, if they avoid the pattern, then the pattern persists and it gets more and more intense because the pattern is there trying to get our attention, trying to bring back awareness, which is the prerequisite for choice. So, this is really important here in the sense that if we want to see changes societally, on a global level, we as individuals have to be able to turn inward and look at the things that we're carrying, just like your parents who are, there's a shame, there's a guilt, there's an avoidance of what had happened.
Absolutely.
I'm not saying that you did this thing to me. I'm not saying that the rage I carry is because you hurt me. But if you avoid it, if you try to suppress it, if you try to cover it up or blame me and attack me for saying that this is the pain that I carry, now the pattern is continuing. This is how it's
Absolutely.
showing up today. So we've really got to address that, and people got to start looking at, how am I contributing to these things? What am I doing to add to it? Or what am I doing to work with it and change it?
Absolutely. And you know, it kind of reminds me of like domestic violence in a way, kind of
Hmm.
how when the abuser, you know, abuses and harms, you know, their spouse or whomever, they kind of try to look away, shrink what they've done and not address it. But in not addressing it, it, like you said, it grows
Yeah. And
and it doesn't go away.
we get
It
into those
doesn't go away.
patterns. We get into those relationships because there's a pattern at play already. The
Absolutely.
abuse happens
Yeah,
for a reason. Yeah.
I don't hate, I don't hate white people, but I hate the abusive system that was made and benefits a lot of European descendants to this day. I do. I
Hmm.
hate it. I don't hate all white people though. I've met amazing people who are
Yeah,
European, who are good people,
absolutely.
good hearts, and very indigenous in their own way, very connected.
Yeah.
But again, like I said, the the system of abuse that's here, that was created in large by their ancestors,
Yeah.
it's here. It exists. And
That's right.
to pretend like people aren't being affected by this, has and still is being affected by this
Yeah.
virus, disease, whatever you want to call it, it's not contributing anything to society that's good for the world.
Right.
We deserve basic respect and human decency. And I don't think that we're really getting it,
Yeah.
you know?
And that might just look like just being able to see the patterns that are at play. Can we see it and can we accept it rather than denying it or avoiding it? And it shows up in such subtle ways. Like when I went to university and I did my undergraduate, I was borderline illiterate. Like I couldn't read. Like I could read the words. I could see that that says strength and courage, judo, but I couldn't
Yeah.
read a page of a book and tell you what they were saying. So I had to work so hard just to get through university. I
Yeah.
bust my ass. I get through it. My GP, my grade point average, mediocre. And then I can't get into graduate school. Everybody just denied, denied, denied. I go and I get a job. I have to apply to 182 jobs at this one place before I even get a call back. And I know that number because they have a profile where they track all your applications, and it told me how many I applied to.
Yeah.
I get my first job, $12 an hour. So I just got $100,000 in debt for school, and I'm going to make $12 an hour. And I work that job. I take several other ones. I worked at this hospital for 5 years. I built up, and then I get a new position. And when I get this new position, they hired in several other people with me. And almost every one of them was a white woman who had just graduated from school. So they came in at the exact same job as me, in the exact same position, the exact same pay, and they had bypassed 5 years of experience of making around $12 to $18 an hour. And none of them had any student loans. None of them had any student debt. Why? Because their parents had wealth. Their parents had resources. Their parents were able to get them into those schools to give them the connections. I didn't have any of that. And that is what this system looks like, is I had to put in, it was more 5 years or more of my life of being shit on and treated like absolute scum, making nowhere near to live in Portland on $12 an hour, where the
Oh
average
God.
studio apartment, 1,200 or 200 square foot of studio apartment costs $1,400. You survive on $12 an hour? No way. But these other people who benefit from the system can come in with no experience, same education, and go straight to what took me 5 years to build up to. And then they go so much further and faster because they got all the connections. They got everything is set up for them. So, of course, I mean, what would anybody feel like being in my position? Angry right away, rageful, hateful in lots of ways. So when I talk about I feel that rage and anger on a daily basis, it's things like that. And it's everywhere I look. I can't afford to buy a house right now. And no matter how much I make, it don't make no difference to where the people who live right around me were able to buy in at a different time in the market for a fraction of the price of what my house would cost today. And they got all this equity and they got all these resources, everything. Where did that come from? I have any of that. The only thing that I can think of is exactly like that job thing is they were born into it. They were born into a system that looked out for them and it looked out for their parents and it looked out for their grandparents. And they had some amount of privilege. I know that word's triggering. I know it's going to activate a lot of people, but there was a privilege there and they
Yeah,
had it and it's still in play today.
absolutely. It absolutely is. You know, I and I don't deny that I myself have privilege to some extent, um, being adopted
Mhm.
by white parents who
Everybody's
were
got privilege of some sort, right?
absolutely, you know, but I remember one of my relatives, my adopted relatives, saying to me, "I don't know why you do all this activism. You know,
Mhm.
I mean, you're just as white as me. Maybe even whiter. Uh, you grew up in privilege and blah blah blah." And I remember just thinking to myself, "That is such bullshit, man. I don't know. That's
No,
just
I
such
hear you.
bullshit."
I hear you. Yeah.
You know, I was in the foster care system. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
20 different homes before I was adopted.
And that's
My
highly
mother,
traumatic, by the way.
highly traumatic.
Yeah.
My father, my biological father passed away from a cirrhosis from alcoholism, and my biological mother, she's somewhere on the street. She's a intense drug addict,
Mhm.
intense, homeless, and just the audacity to say something so um, disrespectful.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I use my privilege in a way where I'm trying to educate and help my people.
Yeah.
The only way I know how I can.
Yeah.
With the little platform I have. I'm just trying my best, and the idea to kind of just erase that, you know, that I do have struggle and strife, and I see my people for who they truly are, and I see beauty, and I've always seen it, and I want to share it. I want to share what I see and what I've learned, and I want to continue to learn from my own people.
Right.
You know, uh, so
Well,
yeah,
you bring up a really important point here, which is privilege takes many forms.
yeah,
You can be financially privileged and you can have a stable house that you were adopted into with two present parents with all their faults, with all the difficulties that were there. You had this privilege. But there's another privilege that is not financial, which is what kind of environment did your body develop into? When you're developing from your mother's neurological nervous system, hormonal systems, where she is interacting with an environment that is highly stressful. She's coping with that stress through means of alcohol or drugs. Your dad is in that exact same situation. That's the environment that your body develops into. And that was the environment that your mother developed into. And again, we can go through the lineage of
Yeah.
our development has been so affected by this intergenerational trauma to where, again, my coworker that came in at that exact same pay rate, 12 years younger than me, didn't have to put in any of that. Her parents were present and they were
Yeah.
connected and attuned to her life, and they were there trying to foster a healthy development. And her grandparents did that for her parents. And through that generation, they had this nurturing. So their development, their ability to navigate life and interact with this world is completely different from somebody like me or from you in that situation. So privilege takes lots of forms.
Yeah.
And these are things that we've really got to look at as well in terms of like when you look at the rate of alcoholism, depression, and other comorbid ailments in native cultures compared to other cultures here in the United States is there's a very clear, significant, distinguishable difference. You can just look at the stats blind without knowing who it is and say, those are the natives right there. Those are the blacks. Those are the white people right there. You can look at it just from there. And this is developmental. This is what's happening, how our bodies are developing and then able to interact with the society and our world.
Absolutely. And yeah, you know, there's a lot of healing. There's a lot of healing that needs to take place, especially for our people,
That's
for
right.
all people, but our people. Unfortunately, my story isn't uncommon.
Yeah.
It's too common, too
It's
common.
too common. That's right.
You know, I've met so many Native people from the US, from the barrios, from, in Mexico, from the from the pueblos, from the original communities, from the city, and they all have a similar, struggles in that sense with, drugs, um, deep trauma, deep trauma, anxiety, you know.
Yeah.
I know there's that book, I forget who wrote it, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yeah, I know
Have you
exactly
read
what
it?
you're talking about. Yeah.
Man, eye-opening.
Yeah. It's absolutely true when you look at the developmental patterns of what happens in your body with everything that you experience. Like when a fire rolls through a forest, the trees that survive and everything that recovers, they're not independent from that fire. That fire is a part of their development. You can see it in the rings, you can see it in the bark. They have now integrated that fire into their being. And so a part of who we are is the trauma that not only you and I have experienced, but what our parents and our grandparents and all of our ancestors have experienced as well. And if we want to heal this, if you want to heal all the things that your body has internalized, first thing is we've got to start to make space for it to exist where we can all just be aware of it and we can identify and recognize these dynamics. Then we got to learn how to accept them, which is we can recognize it. A lot of people can say like, oh yes, so there's no question there's a problem happening, a very clear distinction in privilege and racism and oppression, but can we accept it? Right. And if we
Yeah,
can do that, can we get curious about how these patterns came to be in the first place and how they show up today? And then can we do something different? Can we actually nurture these pains that we all still are carrying around? And it's not just you and me. Like, think about the white people who have lived in this country for 300 years, what their ancestors were going through with the manifest destiny and the expansion and the wars and the constant strife and conflict that they were fighting as well. The trauma, the tension of always having to fear for your life and having to protect this little bit of land that you just claimed because you kicked people off of it. right? Like people get scared about a bear coming onto their property when they have just clear cut part of the forest. Well, what happens when you take out an entire colony of bears or you push them all off is they're going to start coming back onto your property for resources. And then you got the anxiety, the fear, the constant hypervigilance of is somebody going to get me today? And they're carrying that too. We've all got some amount of this trauma and it's all stored inside of all of us. And that's really, I think, the great task of our generation and our age is to really start to address this compounding collective and intergenerational trauma that we're carrying.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's an uphill battle, but I think it's a worthy one. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
I
It's
know
like the
that
most worthy.
it really is. It really is. At this point in time, it's really easy to get into I don't want to say race war, but into like some back
Blame.
and forth. Yeah. The blame game and bullshitting with each other left and right. Um,
That's a continuation of the same pattern.
yeah, you know, and I've been trying to make content that, uplifts everybody, everyone, or educates everyone on
Mhm.
things and, how they can even relate to the indigenous person and see
Yeah.
themselves as having their own unique history, and that's something I hope to continue to do. Um, I want there to be change, and I think education is part of it. You have to be aware of it. You know, if I ignore that I have a knife in my back, right, and I just say, "Oh, it's just something's going on," but I'm not going to look there.
Yeah.
Then shit's going to go down. But if I'm aware that I have a knife in the back, at least I start to develop. Okay, there's something going on here, right? Then that can hopefully ignite change. Start to remedy the situation. And
Yeah.
so many people are. It's like a boxing match, right? I don't think we've lost the match. I don't think we've lost the fight of survival and being alive. But we're knocked out right now. We're unconscious, right? And we're down for the count. And they're counting 1, 2, 3, 4. The referee's counting. We just got to wake up, get back up, you know, and get back up. Because right now we are unconscious. We're not aware of who we are, and if we have an idea of who we are, it's a very misinformed one. And that's the challenge that I think we're facing as a community and as a people. We just need to see ourselves as who we truly are. But in order to know who we truly are, we need to be educated and showed who we are, and be an example of who we are. You know, you brother, you have your hair long right now, right? You're representing your roots and who you are. You're, our story as Native people. And so many of our people, in my tribe in particular, in Sinaloa, northern Mexico, we have, there is traditionally we all had long hair. And there are some of the men, they can speak their language, they practice traditional ways, and that's extremely awesome. I respect it, awesome. But it's like some of them, I haven't seen one person traditionally with their hair long, because there's such a colonized
Mhm.
image of long hair, meaning that it's inherently feminine or, femininity is weakness, either or of those perspectives, right? But regardless, traditionally it was a very masculine quality to have long hair, at least for many of our tribes over here in the Americas, and a very connected way of living. And, but I think that we should definitely teach our children, you know,
Yeah.
teach the kids, have community gatherings where we can educate in a very chill way. It doesn't need to be so much stress. There's always so much stress, especially, and this is my critique about what I see a lot in like indigenous gatherings. There's
Mhm.
so much stress of the hate and the violence, and that's a lot for somebody who might have grown up feeling a lot of trauma, and they may
Yeah.
not even identify with it. So it can be kind of a little overbearing, right?
And that is a sign of that trauma, isn't it?
Exactly. And I think that it would be nice to have more kind of it's good to talk about that stuff always. And
Mhm.
don't get me wrong, we should. Always. I talk about it all the time, but I'm just saying like it might be good to, you know, show our identity outside of our trauma. And I know
Yeah.
that might be a little a sensitive topic, but we are more than the people who were colonized.
Hmm.
We're
Yeah.
more than that. There are unique things about how we live our life that are just as valid and are just as valid for our focus than the great atrocity. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? The great contamination period of what has happened to our people, but we are still here. We're still alive, you know, and we're still walking the earth.
That's
There's a
right.
lot of gifts that we have right now that we shouldn't be taken for granted. And, we can just be together in a communal way. I mean, sometimes it's more than enough to wake up a sense
That's
of
right.
pride and understanding in yourself.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, if you look at the timeline,
Yeah.
okay, and let's say we'll go off of modern education, which is it's been totally disproven at this point, but we'll say the natives in the Americas came 10,000 years ago during the last ice
Straight
age.
bullshit, but yes, I hear you.
Right. I mean, obviously, there's so much signs. There's ruins, there's cities all through the Americas that are 100,000 years old. So
Yeah.
even if we say 10,000 years,
All right. Let's go
200,
for it.
500 years in over 10,000 years is just a small portion of it.
It's so tiny. It's such a little
Yeah.
blip,
It's
you
such a
know?
little blimp, and our people have so much more, as you're talking about, outside of that. We have the ability to heal. All humans have the ability to heal. And we have had practices and traditions, which, as somebody who's really into psychedelic therapy, for instance, I know that almost every culture, all through history, has held a very sacred, a very ritualistic, a highly respected place in their society for ceremony, for healing, for internal exploration. And so I completely agree with you, brother, that one big part of this has to be the connection, the community, but also we need to be able to turn inward and each one of us work with that pain we carry.
Yeah.
And that's where the traditions that we have, the wisdom and the knowledge that we all carry, it's inside of each and every one of us. We can tap into that. And that's where things like ceremony come in, where we really need to bring back these practices. I mean, they still exist. I'm not saying that they're gone, so bring back
Yeah.
isn't exactly accurate, but we need to, in a very respectful way, start to incorporate these into a more, I don't know, I'm going towards like widespread or expanding way to include more people. And I think that on an individual level, we really need to start tapping into those aspects as well of how can I work with this pain? How can I address the pain of the last 500, 600 years? How can I really look at this, what I carry around that my body still has? And it's not just that, it's the pain of what it was like to be born into this world, in this race, looking this way, in this society. And it's not just, again, native peoples, it's the European settlers that are here too. They carry it as well. All these wars and conflicts that have been fought over these hundreds of years, each one of us is carrying the residuals of that, and it's showing up in other ways. So I think we really need to bring back a lot of these healing practices. And this is where that mixing that you were talking about earlier, where we start to create something new, where we can incorporate and integrate all these things that have happened and share it with each other. I think this is super important.
Absolutely. There is a prophecy. I believe it was Lakota. Could be mistaken, but I believe it was Lakota. It's called the Children of the Rainbow Prophecy.
Hmm.
The idea is all the races, the sacred races, groups
Yes.
of people throughout the globe, they get together. And in a time of disbalance, they'd come together and they'd restore balance to the world. Um, you know, when things are leaning in too much in a negative direction, it's supposed to be, uh, yeah, the great equalizer when all the sacred races come together.
Yeah.
And all the offspring of all the sacred races are the children of the rainbow because they're all mixed with each other. And they create a great change. And that was the prophecy. I've heard it a couple of times from other tribes as well. I don't, there's argument of who originally said it first, but
Hmm.
regardless, we can put that where it belongs. The prophecy itself and the meaning of it, I think it rings true. I think that if we really do um, work together and we see that this experience is one with all of us, you know, that we're all experiencing this together, that we can really change. And totally agree. From it starts individually too. With me, you know, it started with my own curiosity and questioning because I was like, wait, okay, so I'm brown, but Mexican, but Latin, but Spanish. But if I'm Spanish, people from Spain look white. They are white. They're European. But then, because then that's
Mhm.
kind of how it started, and then it's just kind of snowballed into a deeper understanding of myself. Because with the questioning came seeking answers and investigating on my own.
That's a power right there.
And then I was like, but okay, so then I'm a Mexican, but then a Mexican is of Indian blood as well. But then what happened in like s- colonization? Okay, but I wanted to really get into the deep of it, because
Mhm.
when you're robbed of your truth,
Yeah.
when you're not allowed to know who you are, and then you have you know people trying to stuff it, you know what I mean? I was privileged enough to have parents who weren't crazy. Like, I mean, they did tell me to kind of like cut it out, but I was in a situation where I was still able to look into it on a deeper level. And oh man, just what was found. And I remember being so freaking confused when I was
Yeah.
12 years old in particular.
Yeah.
I was so freaking confused. I was so like, what is going on? You know what
Yeah.
I mean? But now at 28 years old, in the past couple years, I'm not really that confused anymore. I feel very at peace with who I am.
That's the power of
I have
curiosity.
yeah, because with that going down that rabbit hole, I found out enough information where I understand. I understand. You know, I understand. And it's hard because when you have that understanding, and I'm not saying this out of cockiness or ego, I'm just saying it from my own perspective. You got the receipts here, but so many people are afraid to even look in this direction, right? So making that bridge,
Yeah.
especially for the Mexican, Central South American, and understanding their indigeneity, that's just a path they just don't want to take.
Right.
That's just so heavy, like we've been talking about, right?
And
That
there's reasons
trauma.
for it.
Yeah,
Yeah. Mhm.
honestly, for hundreds of years, it was a safety precaution.
Right.
You didn't want to be native, or you would be, again, lynched. You'd be
Exactly.
violated. You would have been beaten. You couldn't speak your language. But you know, we're in a different time now, and I think it's healthy to challenge these notions that have been imposed on us,
Exploring them like you're talking about. Yeah.
exploring them.
Yeah.
What if what I've been taught is wrong? Like
That's
what?
such an important question.
Because for so many of us, it's like, we don't want to think about that. We don't look there. We're so, you know, distracted.
Mhm.
We're
That's
so
been the
distracted.
recipe. That's been the recipe right there is
The
e
reels are a distraction,
totally. And we've been programmed with this idea that the absolute truth comes from authority. So whether it's the church or it's your school, your teacher, that's the truth. Don't question it. And then enter in all the distractions as well. So it's very difficult to identify propaganda and thought control, for instance. Very challenging to question, what if the way I'm thinking about things, what if the things that I know are wrong? I actually had a dream that really stood out to me early on when I was really getting into this, where a character really jostled me and said, "You don't know the things you think you know." and the voice and the whole situation just really stuck with me. And yeah, I mean, I've had numerous ones like that, and I think that that's super important. When I work with people, when I'm working with somebody, they'll come in with beliefs about themselves, whether it's I'm not good enough, I'm unworthy, I'm not deserving, I'm too much, I'm too little. And my job is to really question those beliefs and help them see, where did you learn those beliefs? And so, exactly what you're bringing up right here, it's super important. Can we question the narratives that we believe ourselves? And
And questioning the dominant narrative
exactly,
is, I mean, everyone wants to be safe, everyone wants to be protected and understand, but sometimes the dominant narrative is the destructive narrative.
that's right.
It can be. It can be. I
That's
mean,
right.
I think that's a truth that many people wrestle with.
Yeah.
They don't wanna acknowledge, but it's true. The
Yeah.
dominant narrative, especially for Indian people, indigenous people, it's been very destructive to us,
It's
you
destructive
know?
for everybody. If you if
Oh,
you
yes.
if you
Absolutely.
follow the dominant narrative, which is go to school, get a job, make money, save money, get married, buy a house, have kids, retire. You follow that exact thing and you can even become a millionaire, billionaire, and you'll still be miserable. And I think that that misery right there is a sign, it's a signal. It's telling you that something with this narrative and this way of looking at things is wrong inherently. And I think we need to question it.
Yep. Absolutely. Absolutely. And, yeah, I definitely think so. Uh, yeah, man.
Exploring it's hard. It's scary, you know. When you were talking just a minute ago about how people had avoided or even renounced their heritage, it just reminded me of when I was getting really curious about my heritage and my lineage. Like I said, you know, my family, my parents were never together. I was bounced around. My mom's white and my dad is Native and Mexican. And I used to ask my grandma all the time whenever I would see her, which was rare. You know, I probably had like 10 interactions with her in my life that I can really remember. I would always ask her every time, Grandma, where are you from? Where are you from? What is your ethnicity? I'm like a little kid, you know, I'm probably 12 to 13 years old, tops around there. Where are you from? And she would always say, Mijo, I'm American, and you're American too. Don't ever let anybody tell you you're not American. And I'm like, well, Grandma, look at you. You're clearly not American. What are you talking about? And she would never tell me where she was. And I would push and I would push and I would push. And finally she said, Mijo, I'm from Texas. And I go, where in Texas? And she goes, the Valley. She's down talking about like McAllen, Texas, down by the border. I was like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Now we're getting somewhere. And one of the last conversations I ever had with her before I moved away, and she's dead now, so I never talked to her again. One of the last conversations, she tells me, she says, Mijo, we're indigenous, we're native, and we come from a lineage of healers. And you're gonna be a healer too. And this conversation at the time, I was 24. I was moving to Chicago. I was moving away
Wow.
from everything. It just kind of like bounced off of me. I was like, yeah, well, I'm training in therapy, so that makes sense. I want to help people heal. And she said, no, no, mijo. We've worked with medicines and we work with spirits, and you're going to be the one. You're the one to do it too. And this was kind of crazy to me because that side of my family's always rejected me because I'm part white. You know, they never welcomed me and always went out of their way to exclude me. And so later on, when I started doing all the research and I saw I'm following the family lineage, I'm looking at all the documentation, I'm going into the census, I see, Texas. That's an interesting place to have been for hundreds of years. As far back as there is documentation, I can trace our family being in that area. And there were wars that were fought over that territory. And what happened after that territory was claimed by the United States? They didn't want the people. They wanted the land. So if you owned land or if you were part of a community that was on that land, is extreme measures were taken to get people off of that land. And so the lynchings, and so the persecution. And so, as you were talking about, it was a defense mechanism to say, no, I'm not Native. No, I'm not Mexican. I'm American. I have naturalized through this process. This is I'm allowed to be here. There's a great fear, and it's a protection. This all of it, these are all protective measures: the hiding, the avoiding, and just as you're talking about here, really learning to get curious and to explore, what do I carry? What's inside of me? Why do I feel this way? This is where a lot of our power is. And then, of course, in connection and sharing and taking and saying, I carry this pain. Look at how fragile and delicate it is. And look at how beautiful it is, too. And I'm willing to bet if you look closely at it, you'll see that you carry it, too. And I think so many people get so angry and they say all these terrible, nasty, disgusting, hateful things because they say, no, I don't want to see that I carry that too. But really, I think they're in so much pain too. So if we can say, like, oh, I'm in pain and you're in pain, what can we do with this? Can we be together? Can we stop adding to the pain? Can we soothe it? I think we have a lot of power here.
Absolutely. 100%.
Well, I got to say, Gabriel, this has been a fantastic conversation. I mean, I'm so happy when I saw you make that post, which coincidentally was saying, you were addressing some of the hateful things that people are saying and opening up to a conversation. So connection, exactly what we're talking about. When I saw that, I was like, oh, you know what? It's time to reach out and see. And I'm so glad that you responded. I'm so glad that we're here right now. I can't thank you enough for doing what you do, and I can't thank you enough for sharing these messages. Like I said, your messages have definitely impacted me. And while there is hate, yes, and I want to acknowledge that, that's only a small piece of it. When I look at the thousands of comments that you get on your pages, like that alligator Alcatraz one, out of 1,000 of them, 995 of them are saying thank you, incredible work, thanks for sharing this, and I think those are really important too. It's important to acknowledge that too. The weight of that hate is so heavy. And look at how many people are also here saying, yes, yes, it's time. Yes, we've carried these lineages, we've carried these patterns, we've had these conflicts, we've all been fighting with each other. It's time to stop this. We can't do this anymore. This world can't handle any more of this. We've got to create something new. And man, I'm so happy that you're out there creating this. I'm so happy that you're doing it, and I'm so happy that you're sharing it and talking to me about it.
Appreciate you, man. Thank you. I appreciate having the opportunity to be on here. It's um, it's a privilege, man. Thank you.
Yeah. For anybody listening who isn't already subscribed to any of the work that you're putting out, tell me, where can people find you? Where can they see any of the things that you're putting out? And especially, is there a place where they can stay up to date with things that you're creating, like this book that you're writing?
Yeah, right now I would say mainly just my Instagram page.
Mhm.
I do have a Facebook as well, but my Instagram is currently underscore Hooso, HOOSO underscore. And yeah, that's my main account. And then I also have my Facebook account, which is Gabriel Hooso Ramos. So
I'll make
that's
sure
my Facebook.
I'll make sure to link all of those.
Appreciate it, man.
Yeah,
Thank you. And
go ahead.
yeah, thank you for your time as well. I appreciate your words and, you know, your message as well, your words of healing.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that we're both in the same space, and I'd love to stay connected. And yeah, I'd love to see if we might be able to support each other and help each other through the road, through this road. So, at the very least, let's stay connected. And again, thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate you.
Thank you, brother. You have a great day, man.